Bambu Lab has released their newest printer, the A1 Mini Plus the AMS Lite. Rather than being larger and more advanced, it's cheaper and aiming to be the ideal first 3D printer. Today we're going to find out if it is. Bambu Lab have disrupted the 3D printer market with a slick range of machines that just work. They have their detractors, but in my opinion, their popularity has grown because their products are good. With the launch of the A1 Mini, they're aiming to branch out. My patrons were disappointed because they were hoping for more, something larger and more advanced, but instead Bambu Lab have gone for entry level, and this might just be the best beginner 3D printer that you can purchase. After teasing a new 3D printer for weeks, Bambu Lab finally revealed the model. This is the Bambu Lab A1 Mini, and as it says, it's a gateway to 3D printing, meaning that it's designed to be an entry point into 3D printing for new hobbyists. Now the structure of this page is something that really annoys me personally, where you try to scroll and it's playing animations instead, but you can click on these buttons up the top to zoom through and find out specific information. I'm not going to read these features now, instead we're going to explore them throughout the video. The most important details can be found by clicking on the tech specs, such as the build volume, which is 180mm cubed. It has an all-metal hot end that can go up to 300 degrees, and there will be various sizes you can switch between. Like other Bambu Lab machines, this can go fast, 500mm per second, but because it's open frame, you're limited to PLA, PTG, and TPU, which means filaments like ABS and ASA that tend to warp aren't really suitable for this. Probably the most impressive thing here is the price, with the standalone printer being $300. This puts it up against Ender 3 clones. It might have a smaller build volume, but I can almost guarantee it has a lot more polish. And if you get the combo with the new AMS Lite, the price is $459, and that's significant because its direct competitor, the Prusa Mini Plus, comes in semi-assembled form for the exact same price, but that will only print one roll of filament rather than the 4-color setup that comes with the AMS Lite. All of my testing has been done over the last few weeks on machines sent to me for free by Bambu Lab. This is after they agreed to my review policy, which is linked below for you to read. Basically that says that you, the viewer, comes first, and I'll give credit where it's due, but I'm also free to point out any problems. So on to unboxing and setup. The machines were undamaged because they were well packaged, with many foam pieces inside a cardboard box fitted to the various parts of the printer. Inside the box for an A1 Mini and an AMS Lite combo there is actually quite a lot. The first thing you should access is the quick start guide. It's short, well written and easy to follow along with. As you can see, color coding is used to highlight the relevant information for each page. We also get a little accessory kit with some tools for working on the printer, some screws used in the setup, and some spare parts like a nozzle wiper, spare filament cutter blades, as well as some grease for future maintenance. Other inclusions are these Bambu filament swatches. These are simply 3D printed tiles with the filament name and ordering number to help you if you like ordering Bambu filament. There's also a mystery box item which we'll explore in detail later on. Here is a very quick summary of the setup. We have this bracket that's in place to stop things from moving, and this is removed and discarded before operation. We have a single cable tie to cut and then a piece of foam that was sandwiched inside that. A nozzle wiping mechanism bolts onto the underside of the X-axis gantry, and then we have this bracket for the optional external spool holder, and it bolts in place where the temporary shipping bracket was. The spool holder then slides down vertically into position if you're not using the AMS Lite or if you're using a flexible filament. Next we have the unusual looking AMS Lite, and there's two major components, with the body sitting on top of the stand, and these two are held together by 4 screws. The spool holders are also quite unusual looking, and they plug onto the shaft sticking out of the AMS Lite. Probably the hardest part of the setup, and this speaks to how easy it is locating the various lengths of PTFE tube and running them from the AMS Lite through to the top of the A1 Mini. There's also a single cable to plug in between the two. The print sheet is now placed on top of the magnetic bed base, and we can peel off the film that covers the touchscreen. And now, after roughly 10 minutes of assembly, we're ready to turn on the machine for the first time, where we use intuitive menus to select our language, our region, and set up our Wi-Fi. The Bambu Handy app is then used to bind the printer to your account. Finally, we're invited to start the self-calibration process. The first part of this is something I haven't seen before, with motor noise cancellation. It runs a series of movements at different speeds, with the cancellation off and then on. I don't pretend to know exactly what's going on, but there is a noticeable reduction in stepper motor whine. Next is a resonance test for vibration compensation, the equivalent of clipper auto-tuning input shaping. When both of these are done, you'll be prompted to download the latest firmware. This is completely automatic at the touch of a button. So all up about half an hour and I was ready to print. So let's load some filament onto the AMS Lite. These holders are unusual, but they seem to work quite well. You simply push in from the side and the spool will be held snugly. We squeeze the release button, feed the filament through the opening, and it will be automatically detected and fed along the Bowden tube, ready to go. The frame does seem to flex a bit as you push the filament on, but once you're printing, it seems perfectly stable. It's also worth noting that I had success with cardboard spools that were much wider than intended. Like the regular AMS, there's an RFID reader to automatically detect filaments that are supported, and if you're using other brands, like I did for much of my testing, you can easily press the edit button and then input your filament type and color. My first test prints were those that were pre-sliced and already on the SD card. And since I was using the AMS Lite, I went for a 3-color 3D Benchy. The pre-printing routine is similar to that of other machines. The nozzle is cleaned using the mechanical wiper on the left. The Z-axis is then homed. We have a quick double check of resonant frequencies, another clean of the nozzle at the back as well as using the brush, and then an auto bed leveling grid is built up using a series of nozzle touches against the bed surface. The nozzle will then return to the wiper, heat up and purge some more filament before it's ejected out the side. Finally, after that, the printing can begin, and boy is it fast. Even though this is the first layer and generally slower than the rest of the print, the speed on offer is what we've come to expect from Bambu Lab machines. Just remember, it wasn't that long ago that the demo 3D benchies that came on SD cards was something like an hour and a half, whereas this printer can do a single color benchy in 17 minutes with excellent quality. When it's time to change filament, a mechanical slicer is used like the other Bambu Lab machines, before the old filament is pulled back and the new filament is inserted. Cue more and more purging and ejection of these squiggles out the side of the machine. And then, after these filament change delays, it's back to the high-speed printing. This one turned out pretty good, and those couple of loose strands you can see, I'll explain that later on. The toolkit comes with scraper blades, and there's a pre-sliced file to then print the rest. These parts take just over an hour and they are multicolour for the logo. Strangely enough, when I put them together, the holes didn't quite line up for the small printed piece, and I think this is a design issue rather than a print problem. To fix this, I had to shave a millimeter or so off the edge, and that finally got everything aligned, allowing me to put it together. So now I have a scraper, but on this printer, I don't really see where I would need one. I also run the Speed Benchy pre-sliced. This one comes in at 17 minutes. For that time, the quality is quite respectable. We have the usual bow line, the details overall are pretty crisp, but on some of the vertical surfaces like the side of the cabin, we can see there's a little bit of Z inconsistency. The same artifacts were present on the holder for the scraper, but I didn't see them in any of the prints I sliced myself. My final pre-sliced print was this bag clamp. It's print in place and everything moved immediately without having to snap parts free. A promising start, but what about models that I sliced myself? Along with the printers, I was sent a link to an internal version of Bambu Studio that had the A1 Mini in place with pre-made profiles. Just like you would expect, there's a range of materials set up and a number of profiles to suit different speeds and layer heights. First up, we have this suspended hand by S-Tom Hacks, and I'd picked this to test bridging performance, as each of these strands are individual bridges at quite a long span. And I'm glad I picked it because this is such a cool print. I've never really made anything like this before. The hand in the middle is completely separate to the frame, apart from those strands going through, suspending it. Bridging and overall quality wise, I'm giving this one a tick. This glitch planter by Vexanix was such a cool design, and I expanded it to fill as much as the build volume as possible. With their single extrusion perimeter, vase mode prints are excellent for testing extrusion consistency and quality. In this area it gets a tick, and I would strongly recommend printing this design, as the way it catches the light and casts shadows is truly stunning when complete. To test something detailed, decorative and pretty, I picked this Vader bust by Eastman, which doesn't require support. It's also a good test of overhangs and bed adhesion because it's positioned on quite a keen lean. I took the chance with this print to run the filament from the external holder without the AMS Lite. There's a 5th PTFE tube that comes with the printer for this purpose. And loading or unloading an external spool is made really simple with an intuitive touchscreen interface. After the nozzle heats, you'll be prompted to feed the filament through until it's automatically grabbed, after which the old color will purge until the new color starts to come through. I also printed this one from the SD card instead of using the cloud connectivity. Again, this is really straightforward. The print will show up with all the others and we simply select it from the touchscreen. As proof that this machine can print at high quality with great detail, this one was magnificent. This is only a 0.2mm layer height, but all of the details have been made nicely. This is another high quality model by Eastman and I strongly recommend making it. As a test of print in place clearance as well as bed adhesion, I picked this adjustable wrench by Tesla Actions. The pre-designed gap between the upper and lower pieces was a little bit large here. That's not the printer's fault, but it means that one part warped. The rest of the print, however, looks stunning, and in terms of the operation of the opening and closing screw mechanism, this print also passed with flying colours. Switching to PETG, I picked this very challenging print-in-place robot by Extreme 3D Print. Before this print, I didn't wipe down the bed with isopropyl alcohol like I had the others because I was worried about PETG sticking too much. But that proved to be a mistake as many of the small components didn't quite adhere to the bed, came loose and ruined the functionality. As a simpler proof of concept for PETG, I then picked this CNC router bit holder by my patron Derek. This one printed quite cleanly with very minimal stringing, however there are some slight vertical artifacts, and I did notice that by the end this print started to lift in the corners. So perhaps PETG adhesion isn't quite where it should be, with this textured bed at least. For TPU, you need to use the external spool holder instead of the AMS Lite, and that's pretty much the only hurdle you'll face. It prints at a reasonable speed and at high quality. This is a bracket that I've made for my recently released hammering machine. It's got 1 or 2 strings that can probably be explained by the filament being quite old, but beyond that, it's dimensionally accurate and works perfectly. Recently, I had a video guide to using HueForge. You don't need a multicolor printer, but it is much more convenient if you have one. So I loaded up Red Bull Racing colors into the AMS Lite and produced this filament painting of Daniel Ricciardo. The A1 Mini and AMS Lite combo is pretty ideal for this type of print. As well as launching the new 3D printer, Bambu Lab have some other new things to give us ideas for projects as well as file sharing. So you may have noticed on the website that A1 Mini combos ship with one of 4 mystery boxes, and I was sent 2 of them to try, the mouse and the LED lamp kit. The idea is that inside the box are all of the electronics and hardware needed to construct that project. And then to make the item, you 3D print the remaining parts. And I love this idea. It's the type of thing that I would have loved to have used when I was still teaching in the classroom. In the Bambu Handy app, you use the built-in QR code reader to scan the side of the box and be taken to the details for that object. You then select your printer and the plates you need to complete the object will be listed, as well as the quantity and type of filament required. Tap print and then once again select your machine, as well as assigning which slot on the AMS Lite that you're using if you are. The final button Print Now will start the job on your printer over the cloud. It did say waiting for slicing, but this only lasted around 30 seconds before the job started. The wireless mouse has 2 plates, with the first one being the longest and it's the body of the mouse, and I picked a really fancy sparkly blue filament for this. The second plate, I just went for plain black PLA. This blue part has inbuilt organic supports and it was absolutely stunning. Maybe one of the best things that I printed on this machine. Once you have all of the parts back on the app, you can come to the assembly guide, and that will load a PDF to your phone with step-by-step illustrated instructions. I found this quite easy to follow, and this whole mouse only took around 5 minutes to put together. The only component not included in the box was a single AA battery to power the mouse. Even though all I did was click a few buttons on an app to slice this file, I still had a sense of ownership in the project and I took great pride in putting it together. I can only imagine how good this would feel for someone new to 3D printing. Of course, the mouse was completely functional and plug and play, allowing me to get on with my usual browsing activity. As for the Lite kit, I didn't use a QR code because I had other plans. Which brings me onto MakerWorld, a 3D file sharing platform similar to Printables and Thingiverse before it. In late August, Bambu first blogged about this, going through some of the details. I joined the beta program and browsing through, it looks very similar to Printables, which is probably a good thing. There are already plenty of options for this type of website, so I'm not super enthusiastic about yet another one. I guess one advantage will be that if you have a Bambu Lab printer, you can slice and print directly from MakerWorld. One thing I told Bambu Lab I was concerned about was intellectual property. You might recall that when Creality launched a similar website, most of the content was stolen straight from other websites. But in the blog it says they have a dedicated team that can quickly remove any infringing objects. When you browse MakerWorld, you'll see a lot of familiar objects, such as this cable organizer that's been ported over by Squin. However, other objects were a little bit more unclear. We can see that this Death Star lamp was remixed by Kalola, pointing back to a file on printables by Juggernaut Print, itself a remix of the Tato 713 file, modified to suit a particular IKEA lamp. Apologies if I'm wrong, but as far as I can tell, nothing's actually been remixed here. It's got the same description, and it seems like it's just been taken from printables. Even if I'm wrong here, there's going to be plenty of cases where work is just taken, and the Bambu Lab team is going to be flat out keeping up. I had to scale this one down very slightly to fit on the bed, and it was a good chance to test out the inbuilt support, which with a little bit of twisting and pulling was able to pull free of the model. To my eye, this was another nice quality print, and of course it's designed to be used as a lamp, and it looks really good when illuminated by the mystery box LED kit. I'll need to make a proper base to stick it down, but my kids are already fighting over who gets it. To finish up, let's inspect and test some of the new smart features, and then follow up with some pros and cons. Bambu Lab actually sent me a second A1 Mini, a clear pre-production version, and this will be excellent for looking at some of the details. The first thing to note is that this machine is built extremely well, with bulky linear rails for each axis, including this monster one for the bed, and a combination of metal parts with injection molded plastic covers that add rigidity but also give it a high-end appliance feel. There's clever little mechanisms everywhere you look, like this one that the print head pushes against to wipe the nozzle, the rather unique spring-loaded system for storing the filaments on the AMS Lite, and this clear version shows that inside we have an RFID tag but no motor, which means these spindles are spring-loaded to help retract the filament on filament changes. We also have some interesting smart features, each that can be turned on and off from the LCD. And the first of these are sounds, which play on boot at the start of the print and when it's finished. Do you remember that first benchy with the random blobs and strings? Well, it turns out that was the step loss recovery kicking in for the pre-sliced demo print. Sure, those artifacts are annoying, but it's better than losing the whole print to a layer shift. There's also some smart features found inside the print head. We've got this tiny fan used for the heatsink, and then a larger blower fan feeding the twin part cooling ducts. This sensor here isn't present in the final versions, so I guess they were going a different direction for bed leveling originally. We have a manual lever for releasing the grip on the filament, and on the other side we have our levered filament cutter, just like on the X1 and P1 models. Buried in the middle is the filament runout sensor and odometer. It sounds like it has an encoder to detect more than just the filament running out, but I did test it in that capacity and the transition was seamless. The filament entry at the top of the print head is also sprung loaded, and that's another sensor to detect filament jams. To try this out, I clamped the filament so it wouldn't be able to feed into the AMS Lite. And a few seconds later, the printer detected this and paused, prompting me to check for tangles and resume the print when ready. Perhaps one of the cleverest features are the interchangeable nozzles, and the hardest part of this process is wrestling off the silicone sock. After that, everything is toolless. We've got this retaining clip that you get off with your finger, and then you pull the nozzle and heatsink straight out. No tools, no thermal paste, with installation being the same steps in reverse order. We've also got a camera with a light next to it. I'm not a huge fan of the angle or the frame rate, but it's better than nothing, and you can use it in the slicer or the app to monitor print progress. It's also capable of some weirdly distorting time lapses, which is probably a result of having the moving bed. And if you don't want the camera, there's a sliding physical cover to block its view. A lot has gone into this, so let's summarize strengths and weaknesses. I would say this is a very polished product and it's very convenient and easy to use. Unboxing and setup is quick and accessible for most people. The touchscreen is clear, intuitive, and for people new to 3D printing, it's going to feel familiar because it's like a mobile phone screen. There's a lot of automation built in, with things like auto bird leveling and automatic setting of the Z offset, meaning that for me, all of my first layers were perfect without me having to even think about it. And I haven't needed it yet, but there's a built-in assistant that will send you to a website when you need help. print speed is really fast, and these speed rates and accelerations would have been unheard of only a couple of years ago for anything but custom machines built up by experienced users. But this speed doesn't lower the print quality, and you can judge for yourself by what you've seen in the video, but I would suggest my only problem prints were those that were pre-sliced already on the SD card, so who knows what happened there. Another advantage is the ecosystem, with the slicer having support for a range of different filaments. But you're not locked into only using Bambu Lab filament. You can use whatever filament you're comfortable with, and over the years, I've found the generic Bambu Lab profiles to be just as good. There's also the convenience of the Bambu Handy app and the upcoming integration with MakerWorld. After setup, you can operate the printer without the app, but for those who do want it, it's a really useful tool. On to the negatives, and the elephant in the room is that while the printer is small, once you add the AMS Lite next to it, it's actually quite a lot larger than an X1 or P1 printer. The AMS Lite functioned very well from my testing, but it is kind of ungainly looking. I guess you could call it an acquired taste. An obvious problem is this filament wiper. The first issue is that the filament is ejected sideways next to the printer, and it's not going to be very long until a mess builds up. The other issue is that it seems like an excessive amount of filament needs to be purged, even at the start of single color prints. However, I suspect this is part of the active flow rate compensation, where a certain amount of filament needs to be extruded at the start of the print, and this is actually replacing the calibration pattern that the X1 uses. What's still the same as other Bambu Lab printers is the filament wastage for multicolor prints. The earlier Bambu models have this problem too, and nothing seems to have changed for the A1 Mini. I did have some sticking issues with PETG. This is uncommon, and maybe the smooth plate will be better suited. In terms of noise, it's silent when sitting idle, but the amount of noise varies depending on what's being printed. I think the steppers are quieter than the X1, but the noise of the part cooling fan is something that's hard to avoid when printing at these speeds. Some people will be upset that this is a bed slinger instead of a Core XY, but if you objectively look at the print results, it's hard not to conclude that this doesn't make any difference. I suppose the ultimate question is, who is this 3D printer for? It is very polished and appliance-like, and if you're a fan of open source, the RepRap movement, and you like to build your own 3D printers, perhaps community designs, then you probably didn't like the old Bambu Lab machines, and this one isn't going to change your mind. If you don't care about any of that and you want a machine that just works, then I would suggest this is going to be a great budget performer and particularly good for beginners to 3D printing. All of that self-calibration and those smart features, combined with the fast printing and great print quality, are pretty hard to beat. That's my opinion, and there's no doubt going to be a lot of videos about this machine, so please check out as many as you can before purchasing, discount the ones that don't have anything negative, and try to build up some trends between what's left. Let me know your opinion about this machine down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy 3D printing.
G'day, it's Michael again. If you like the video, then please click like. If you want to see more content like this in future, click subscribe and make sure you click on the bell to receive every notification. If you really want to support the channel and see exclusive content, become a patron. Visit my Patreon page. See you next time.